What do you think you're most known for? Your acting, your music, or the controversy that surrounds you?
My big mouth.
Say what you will about Tupac. There's no denying that his music spoke to the emotions, struggles, dreams, and experiences of the powerless. There's a plethora of information about his music, life, and death, but there's little mention of the political work he accomplished throughout his life. But the fact that he actively engaged in political work is what sets him apart from other so-called gangster rappers. In 2011, Dr. Karen Stanford set out to fill the literature void on Tupac's activism and his role in the fight against racism and inequality towards African Americans. But before we can begin to understand Tupac's political work, Dr. Stanford suggests that we first understand his political views. As a young boy, he was in support of black nationalism, which is defined as the political belief and practice of African Americans as a distinct people with a distinct personality who politically should develop structures to define, defend, and develop the interest of blacks as a people. Tupac gives us insight into his political views with his song, Words of Wisdom.
This is for the masses, the lower classes, once you left out, jobs were given better living, but we were capped out, made to feel inferior, but we're superior, break the chains on our brains that made us inferior, pledge allegiance to a flag that neglects us, honor a man that refused to respect us, emancipation, proclamation, please.
In examining these words, we see Tupac opposing the existence of economic inequality and scarce employment opportunities available to the disenfranchised.
We should have gave them some money. We really should have helped these folks. It's gonna be too late, you know what I'm saying? And then that's when you gotta pay your own karma. And that's when God make you punish, God punishes you. Because I feel like, it's too much money here. I mean, nobody should be hitting lotto for 36 million and we got people starving in the streets. That is not idealistic, that's just real. That is just stupid.
By identifying with revolutionary nationalism and supporting its teachings, Tupac strived to build a society that would not tolerate oppression of any kind, but instead thrive by treating individuals humanely. Tupac's passion for activism was no accident. From an early age, he was exposed to the political concepts and efforts of NAPO.
Taught me how to be community oriented
and to analyze society. So me and my sister grew up good and we have good minds and everything.
And was even named Tupac Amaru in praise of an Incan revolutionary of Peru in the 18th century. By age 7, he attends a rally in New York City, and soon after, his organizational abilities would begin to emerge as he organizes a demonstration in support of his elementary teacher. In 1986, he would relocate to Baltimore and would quickly go to work on improving the conditions that African Americans living in the city found themselves in, stating, "As soon as I got there, being the person that I am, I said, no, I'm changing this." So I started a Stop the Killing campaign, a safe sex campaign, an AIDS prevention campaign, and everything. As his household became more difficult to tolerate, Tupac would break away from his mother and move west to Northern California at the age of 17. Dr. Stanford points out that while Tupac continued to get involved in community work, his most valued gift came in the form of artistry. He was known to organize plays and would give hip-hop performances. As a black male, growing up, frustrated during the presidencies of Reagan, Bush Sr., and Clinton, he began to direct his music towards the Oval Office. This was a time of economic and social decline for the African American community, as the Reagan administration would make it much more difficult to attain public assistance, and would go on to target those utilizing the welfare system and label them as dependent, lazy, and looking for handouts. Tupac would become a member of the New African Panthers at age 18, and as Dr. Stanford points out, he was quick to get involved and position himself to become chair of the movement. The group was composed of activists dedicated to enacting social change by participating in community events, speaking out against police brutality, helping free political prisoners, and spreading the word of NAPO. With Tupac in charge, he took it upon himself to organize events and meetings, while selling newspapers created by the movement and putting on classroom presentations and hip-hop performances.
American dream wasn't meant for me, 'cause lady liberties and hypocrisy lies for me. Promise the freedom, education, equality.
At just 19, Tupac hit his professional debut as a musician and would have to resign from his chair position for the new African Panthers. But with his musical fame as leverage, he would continue to support the movement by spreading the word while on his travels and tours. More importantly, he would utilize his fame as a political tool and his music as a political outlet.
I just try to speak about things that affect me and about things that affect our community. Sometimes I'm the watcher, and sometimes I'm the participant, and sometimes it's just allegories or fables that have a moral or underlying theme, like the ghetto lifestyle.
With the release of his first album, Tupacalypse Now, audiences were given a mix of social observation through the lens of Tupac himself, with songs such as Brenda's Got a Baby, which addresses sexual exploitation of young women of color, and Words of Wisdom, which acknowledges racial discrimination. In addition, Dr. Stanford points out that Tupac would go on to form Underground Railroad, a rap group composed of young people looking to get away from the criminal life by getting involved in making music. Built on the foundations of Harriet Tubman's work, members of the Underground Railroad were to be devoted to their communities. Tupac was devoted to interacting with incarcerated individuals, visiting various prisons and organizing musical performances for the inmates. What he did well, and something that is largely understated, was his ability to connect with his audience, which was young people living in urban areas, and using this culture to organize community and political action. And as Dr. Stanford puts it, this isn't the first time that African Americans use culture as a means for organization. Going back to slavery and the civil rights movement, we see song, dance, and music as forms of motivation and revolution. Simply put, Tupac understood the value of culture in sparking political action. Utilizing hip-hop culture was the only way he knew would speak to his generation, and that meant overemphasizing hip-hop features, such as wearing oversized baggy jeans and white tees to show solidarity with imprisoned youth, and his 26 tattoos, or his recognition for sticking his middle finger up in the air and spitting, to communicate his lack of respect for law enforcement and those who wish to silence his generation. Tupac also set out to influence inner city youth to engage in activism by creating a philosophy that they could understand, relate to, and accept. Thus came to be thug ideology. The concept behind this philosophy was founded on his experiences of living on the streets after leaving a dysfunctional home life, and spoke about the problematic events experienced by those growing up in disenfranchised communities.
When I'm saying thug, I mean not criminal, someone to beat you over the head. I mean the underdog. If the person that had nothing succeeds, he's a thug, because he overcame all obstacles. It doesn't have anything to do with the dictionary's version of thug.
For Tupac, it wasn't that he created the lifestyle, but instead exposed it, stating, "I didn't create thug life, I diagnosed it." Those living the thug life were known as thugs, and were thought of by Tupac as a potential force that could help protect the community, if organized appropriately. According to Dr. Stanford, Tupac knew that thug life as a concept was better understood and accepted by his generation.
To me, it's like, when I say I lived a thug life, baby, I'm hopeless. One person might hear that and just like the way it sounds, you know what I'm saying? But I'm doing it for the kid that really lives a thug life and feels like it's hopeless. So when I say hopeless, and when I say when I say it like that, it's like I reach him. You understand?
But he also understood the importance of developing a philosophy for thug life that would serve as an educational and organizing tool. To help facilitate the process, he would go on to create the Code of Thug Life, which was founded on the premise that thug life would occasionally incorporate violence and criminal activity, but that the most important priority was the protection of the Black community. The positive effects of the thug life were apparent, starting with the agreement of both the Bloods and Crips to sign and stand by the code.
I think even gangs can be positive. It just has to be organized and it has to steer away from being self-destructive to being self-productive.
He also took part in the One Nation Project, which united musicians from various genres of music into one united force, and even began an album that would be the result of a collaboration between East Coast and West Coast rap artists, an extra effort in helping eliminate the tension between the two.
We're working on a new project called One Nation. It's gonna be an East Coast, West Coast collaboration.
Nas characterized Tupac as an inspiration, stating, "If he were still alive, he'd have inspired me to become more active." To say that Tupac was just a gangster rapper is unjust. As Dr. Stanford explains, Tupac became the political advocate, educator, and motivator of the urban youth and for the greater hip-hop community. While he certainly had his own personal demons, his efforts were significant in helping connect hip-hop and activism, and he understood quite well that social change would not come by simply making political rap music, but by engaging in more effective and powerful ways that enact change.